So, any questions?
I've got a few things to. I'm gonna real quick give Dennis just a real quick introduction of yourself because you're working on a book
Yes,
about
sir.
prehistoric scenes. So, real quick, tell us about that, and then I want to do a lightning round on the kits, and I'll get to that in a second. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's so great to be working with Jim. So I'm working with Jim Keeler and Tori McCarrow, who is the son of Aurora's packaging designer, Sal McCarrow. Tori's kit builder. He builds these two kits you've seen here. He built all the kits for those who are familiar with the Monster Scenes book I did back in 2014, which is due for revision. Stay tuned for that. But after we completed the Monster Scenes book, and it was very well received. Worked with Andy Gansis very closely on that. We determined that a prehistoric scenes book made sense too, because
Right.
John, I was one of those monster kids from the day, and became also one of the Dino boys of the day, or Dino persons, whatever we want to say, because I made the migration from monster scenes over to prehistoric scenes. And all the details that I've been able to find out about, my favorite kits from my childhood, monster scenes, prehistoric scenes, has only been, I've gotten enlightenment and all the embellishments I've ever could have dreamed of by getting to know Andy Ansis and getting to know Jim Keeler and getting all the backstory from the whole Aurora efforts to do this. And the one thing I will say to wrap up this thing, so I am working on the prehistoric scenes book. We're working to complete that this year, get that out to print this year. It's been a long time coming because of other projects, competing projects that I work on. But one thing that I will say, and Jim's point about Tomy and AFX, and they still exist today. The fun thing is with prehistoric scenes, after 50 years, they still exist today. And they are the original kits. I was working with Atlantis Models, who I've licensed the prehistoric scenes name to, for the recent K-Bear and Saber-Tooth Tiger release. I worked with them on that T-Rex release that Jim has there in front of him. I had to design that packaging because they real quick story. They had a square box that they were going to package in, and but the Tyrannosaurus art is about like this and this, right?
Yeah.
So it's landscape, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't know what the heck to do. That Andy was trying to design something. How do I design this thing? Because if he pushed it to fit the front, then the top and bottom, and then you've got box, right? And so I said, well, give me a shot at it. And I was the one who said, well, let's just wrap the tail around the one side. So that's why that looks the way that looks, because I didn't want to have the blank top and bottom.
Right.
And Andy said to me, he goes, oh, I would have never thought about doing that. It's perfect. So I got the chance to design that for them. I redesigned the bear and the Saber-Tooth Tiger box for them. And it's just so cool that these are shot from these original molds. So this is all original stuff. And last thing I'll say about the prehistoric scenes book I'm working on, which is same for the monster scenes, and you saw Dr. Deadly here a minute ago, is that what I'm doing for that book, same as I did for monster scenes, is I'm using all actual original Aurora kits for this book. And yes, I am doing the sacrilegious thing of breaking open sealed kits from 50 years ago, but for the sake of what we're doing and for the sake of history, I feel it's the thing to do. So anyway, and I'm chronicling it on the Facebook page, the Prehistoric Scenes official Facebook page, so folks can find out more there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I bought that Saber-Tooth Tiger and the K-Bear. I bought the recent editions of those. So
I've got them too.
Yeah.
I've got some too.
Okay, let's get into the kits here. Give me a second. We'll see if technology will cooperate with me here. If it doesn't, well, we'll just revert back. But all right. Oh, Go back. There. Come
Yep.
on.
I
Seriously.
see it.
Okay. Neanderthal man. Let's start with him. That was the first. Am I correct in that was the first of the series to come
The
out?
patterns.
Yeah.
I believe it was the first pattern, yeah.
Okay. Just real quick, and we're going to go through all of them. So we won't spend a lot of time, but any thoughts or memories or anything about that kid, or how, if you had to do it again, how would you do it? Or
I did it pretty much the same way we did, and the idea we used on the human figures was to put them in action poses so that they were in the middle of doing something.
right.
Um, uh, but we had to do it so that we didn't have to put the something on there either.
Right.
Basically.
And let me add this too. That was my first prehistoric scenes kit.
How cool.
And here's a funky little tidbit. Maybe I'll write this in the book. But the reason I really like this is because of the name Neanderthal Man. There was a 1950s cheesy horror film called The Neanderthal Man that I remember seeing on TV as a kid. I thought, oh, it's another monster kit. I love it. I got to have it. This was after I collected the prehistoric scenes, or the monster scenes, excuse me. But anyway, he was first kit, and he was just that box, that little box, and you're looking at the second issue box that you're getting right now. But that first issue box, that thing was jam full of parts. It is it is probably by far, I think, one of the best figure kits that I've ever had a chance to build as a kid.
Yeah, I enjoy building it too. Mine was, and I'll get to it in a minute. The flying reptile was my first. But when I decided to go through and make the different models, I eventually started going in order, and I very shortly I did a couple of triceratops, and shortly after that I started following the production order to a degree. So yeah. Okay, so next one up is the Cro-Magnon man. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, basically the same thing there. We tried to pack the box with all kinds of parts so that when the child got it, that he had something to do instead of just putting like 6 or 7 parts together.
Right.
And we again, we had him in an action pose of killing a snake there.
Yeah.
That one thing that we did is we put clothes on him.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really want to do, but you know.
Excuse me.
You mean there was like an unclothed Cro-Magnon woman at some point? Oh, that would have flown off the shelves.
Yeah.
You thought monster scenes was trouble, right?
Yeah.
Exactly,
Wow.
Exactly.
I will say about the Cro-Magnon man, or if you're French, Cro-Magnon man, that he's very striking to. Well, one thing you're going to see in my research too is that there's a film, a Hammer film, 1 million years BC. Most of us know because of Raquel Welch, right? But man, in my research and watching that film again, you can see where so much of this stuff, and I ran this past Andy as well. It's like was very inspired by that film, because it was an inaccurate pairing of dinosaurs, and human beings, but that's okay. And the only point I'll say to that is Andy explained to me. He said, we created the timeline and this other information because we wanted people to know we know dinosaurs and mankind did not coexist.
Right.
But that's what the kids wanted to see. So
of course. And real quick, here you go. Can you see her?
No, I can't see. I'm still seeing your Neanderthal man right now.
Let me. Okay. I have you know, at a certain point, I'll come back to it. But I have Raquel Welch to show you.
Yes.
It was on my shelf earlier.
I
Okay.
I saw it earlier when you and I were doing a little pre-talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I imagine same as Cro-Magnon man, Cro-Magnon woman, kind of the same concept, same approach.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the next one I want to talk about is the cave. So what were your and before you kind of answered something I was going to talk about, which was it struck me that a lot of these kits were geared at the time not to adult model makers but to kids. Am I correct on that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the cave. Tell me your thoughts on the cave.
Well, the cave was that was an interesting one to do. We had to make it realistic, but in order to make it really realistic, you'd have to put in a mountain and put the cave inside the mountain,
Right.
Which is where they belong. They're not a big pile of rocks, you know, out
Right.
in the middle of the field somewhere. So that one was challenging to put it together so that, for instance, the box art looks like you're inside a real cave looking out.
Right.
And so rather than do the packaging, so we were looking at the cave as a finished model.
Mm-hmm.
We did the excitement of they're in there roasting a piece of a giant bird or something there for dinner, and with the bones in the foreground, we really tried to make it look like a cave, but
Yeah.
from the outside, it created a real problem for us. Now, how do you make that look like?
Yeah.
And in the end, I mean, we went through several. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We went through a lot of designs on the cave.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other figures were pretty straight. But
Right.
the cave was a difficult one. But I think that it turned out really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It succeeded in doing what we wanted it to do. And when it was all finished and built and the rocks were all painted and everything, I thought it looked pretty damn good. You know.
So if I can, let me give you the Dino Kid reaction to what you guys were doing over there on West Hempstead. That was like that was the piece I wanted the most. I so was chosen for the cave. And it was hard for me to find. I had real difficulties finding it for whatever reason. All those accessories, that was so fun about these. All those accessories were just incredible. And the first time I was ever exposed to prehistoric scenes was at a kind of a variety type store called Payless Drugstore. I happened to be in there looking in their toy aisle, model aisle, and there was the big first series display that had the built cave, that had the Neanderthal man on top with the Allosaurus advancing towards him. And that cave was just like, I've got to have that thing. And as far as it looking like a prehistoric easy up of the day, right?
Yeah.
Never even crossed my mind as a kid. Loved it. Had to have it. So beautiful work, Jim.
Yeah.
That was a very difficult one to do. And to make it so that it looked right on the outside as well as looking into it. We took several weeks of sketches and drawings and clay models and all kinds of stuff before we ended up with it. And you mentioned the accessories, and that's one thing that we also tried to include so that to take scene concepts so you had more than just a figure standing there, you know.
And one thing I'll say too, and this is and I talked to Andy at length about this too. And this actually happened in monster scenes, and most people don't realize it. But you turn two caves in on each other, and they fit together like puzzle pieces. And
Yes.
and what I love about the prehistoric scenes community online, the Facebook community, they know this, and you've got builders out there showing this, and it's just really wonderful. How these do work together, and how you folks did have the foresight to try to solve that problem. You know, how do you not just have a pile of rocks leaning up out of the middle of some barren wasteland? They turn on each other. It's really clever stuff.
But we had fun.
Yeah. I can definitely see in that kit how it is designed for kids, because as an adult model builder, you know, there's that big gap across the top. And at one point I like to call it the Malibu caveman dream cave.
It's a dollhouse.
It is. And for kids, I promise you, if I'd had a chance to get that as 8-year-old me, I would be all about that. So yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which I believe is going to be the saber-toothed tiger.
Well, let me tell you another little story too.
Sure.
We had we were a block away from a really good Italian restaurant.
Okay.
And so that was one of the places when we went, most of us went together.
Yeah.
The whole R&D department, or a good part of the R&D department. And we'd get a big table and sit down and have a really long lunch, and sometimes by the time the end of lunch there'd be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 empty bottles on the table as well. and so our creativity was
Yeah. It was only a bottle away.
It was only a bottle.
It was only a bottle away. Oh wow!
And I remember one day we came back and we had a meeting to a concept meeting, and the idea was just to come up with totally new products that nobody'd ever done before.
Yeah.
And that was the day that I invented giant floor puzzles. So if you ever see a giant floor kitchen puzzle, that was my invention.
Oh,
but that was also, I think that was a 6 or 7 bottles.
okay. Well, that does lead back into all the bases do, like a puzzle, go together. And that was also, as a kid, to see them, which was brilliant marketing, by the way, to have that map, like, oh, if you get them all, you can put them all into this big display. And I've actually done that. And so there's your floor puzzle right there. But that was, I mean, there were, I'll just interrupt real quick and say there were a lot of compelling things that worked right with the prehistoric scenes kit.
Yeah.
The map, the concept itself, but also just the really compelling box art. I can tell you as a kid, I was like, wow. Yep. So yeah. Anyway, saber-tooth tiger. Let's get to saber-tooth tiger. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the box art, we played around with a lot of ideas for the box art, and also for the creation of the item to make it really exciting. And that was one of the things that we wanted to put a lot of animation in.
Yeah.
Even though it was solid, still, you could move some pieces on it.
Yeah.
But we wanted it to look like it was just coming out of an animated comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the idea behind it.
Little reaction on that one too is that what was interesting, and this goes back to Sal Macaro in the packaging. I like the transition from monster scenes to prehistoric scenes, and that you had the 4 smaller boxes, figures, and then you would have the 4 larger boxes of the scenes. In this case, it was interesting to see that you would have the same form factor on these boxes, but that the tiger was presented as one of the figures, and that was really interesting to see. I really enjoyed that. And then we had the Allosaurus and the reptile. I know we'll get to those in the same scene boxes as monster scenes. But then we saw the square box, which was new to me and very exciting for the cave and the tar pit because of their size.
Yeah.
But as far as the tiger goes, yeah, he's just fun. All the different legs was really just a treat for a kid.
Yeah.
To get so many different legs. And I've seen on the Prehistoric Scene Society page on Facebook how some of the builders are doing just so many they're still making scenes with these things. I think I just recently saw one with 2 tigers advancing a Cro-Magnon man.
Yeah.
It's a great kit, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love building that kit.
It's amazing sitting here talking about these and looking at them on the table. I guess, I mean, I'm a car man, okay? But this group of kits was one of the most successful things I think I ever did.
Yeah.
Along with Andy.
Agreed.
I always have to throw in Andy because it was Andy and I working together. It wasn't either of us, it was both of us. And a lot of hours talking to each other to make it happen. I'd take Andy to lunch, which he normally did not do. He very rarely went with the group. When we went to lunch, he'd sit there and he brought a sack lunch home from home. And that's what he ate. And but I would take him out, and then we could spend 2 or 3 hours going over something, and there would not be any phone calls, no phone rings, no people walking in from that needed problem solved from me, and gave us the freedom to do stuff. And it was really cool going into New York to the museums with him, and spending entire days. What a hell of a job.
I want that job.
And I look back on it and it was such a joy to work with, because nobody else aside from the new R&D guy got their fingers in the pie.
Yeah.
Although he did want sharper, bigger teeth in Tyrannosaurus as well. And so that's one other concession that was made. But
Yeah.
that was it. I mean, there just wasn't anything else. And so, I mean, if you go to Yellowstone today and you see a bear, a great big grizzly bear, that packaging really says it all. I lived in West Yellowstone, Montana for 3 years, 3 complete years. And I restored a 1903 Pullman railroad car.
Oh, wow.
And one day I decided to go out and go gold mining with my gold pan. And the river there was a big gold mine up on the hill, and I figured, well, there might be some stuff in the South Fork of the river. So I went down to the South Fork of the river and had my gold pan.
Yeah.
Parked the car, walked over to the river, went to put my hand down because there was a 4-foot embankment there.
Yeah.
And as I went to put my hand down, right where my hand was going was a footprint about 14 inches across.
Oh.
And it was a grizzly bear footprint, and it was still, water was still coming out of it.
Oh.
And it turns out that I had stepped down into the stream 20 feet away from a grizzly bear, who was on the other side of some bushes. And for some reason, he didn't hear me or see me, and I didn't hear him or see him. And I saw that footprint and realized he was right there.
Wow.
And so I backed up and I stepped out of the stream and I started walking backwards towards the car. And I got most of the way to the car, which was only about 30 feet away. And this grizzly bear stood up in front of me. And you have to, around the towns in Montana, you have to report those kinds of things when it's close to a town. And so I reported it. Oh, that's old so-and-so, and he's 1,900 pounds, you know.
Oh, wow. Wow.
He's, what do you say, he was 16 feet tall or something like that, you know. It was just this monster, huge animal.
Oh, wow.
Like the cave bear. Okay, that's what it looked like. And he was coming at me like that.
Ay, 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 ay.
And I got in the car, and he was down in the stream bed, but there was a 4-foot embankment. Otherwise, he would have come right on over. And he stood there for 10 minutes, you know, snorting and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to eat you for dinner. And scared the holy crap out of me. And I got in the car, and I thought, and back then we didn't have cameras like we have now. But I had a pair of binoculars, and I thought, oh. So I got the binoculars out. Well, he was so close, I couldn't focus on anything. Yeah. But that's what the cave bear looked like, and the artist really pulled it off. Yeah, you know. And this was way before I saw the real grizzly and was nearly eaten by one. So
wow.
Anyway, but no, I really like that kit.
Well, that was maybe my second prehistoric scenes kit. But it was, as a kid, I was just fascinated by it. The one thing I wanted to ask about is there's a hole in the chest of the kit. If you look, not the bear, but the tiger. There's a little circular hole in the chest. Now I'll see if I can. I'm going to send you guys some pictures on Facebook here, on Facebook Messenger, so you can see them. I'm going to take a picture of where that hole is at, and how I put it to use. Because it didn't have like a stand or anything.
Exactly that.
Yeah. But exactly, it's like
that. Yeah.
So I took a piece of clear plastic rod and put it in there and elevated it so it was jumping over that rock.
Correct.
That's why the hole's there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I never saw a little strut or a little rod to do that with. I guess
we didn't put one in.
Okay. You just left it for people to do on their own?
We just left it for people to do on their own.
Okay.
And because it was also fairly well hidden once you assembled the kit.
Right. Well, I put it to use, so it worked.
Good job.
Yeah. And one of the things about, really all of the different animals, but certainly with the saber-toothed tiger and the bear. And let's go ahead and talk about we'll get to the bear in a minute. Is that there's a number of different ways you could paint those. And it really, I think I told Jim the other day, I've got at least 3 more sets of each one. And so I'm going to do one set that's right like the box art, exactly like the box art. And then I want to do one that's like super realistic as based on what we know about paleontology today, and one that's just complete flights of fancy. But I've seen some people do so many different things, especially with the tiger. Anyway, let's get on to the next one. Is going to be the flying reptile. Now, this was the first one that I had. So, some thoughts about the flying reptile, Jim?
Well, probably the most difficult thing was we wanted to be able to put the wings on it so that they could be assembled in different positions.
Yeah.
And it was extremely difficult to engineer the system that we did use. But we did it.
Yeah.
And so you could, you could hang this guy from the ceiling, and your mother would walk in the room at night and go, rah, but we wanted to be able to do that. And it also allowed for the model to be considerably larger than the box.
Right.
Which was another good feature. So,
yeah.
But the other thing too that is important about all of these is we made them all snap together.
Yeah.
And, so that made it kind of difficult when we came to the flying reptile to be able to do it and to make the wings the way they were. And I did get some complaints from people that, well, the little pins broke where they mounted on.
Yeah.
And of course, with today's super glue, you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But it was an ugly beast. But there was, on all of these, there was a lot of research that we covered.
Yeah.
And so some of that research suggested that the poses that we did put them in, okay.
Yeah.
The flying reptile, especially being one that had a really unusual pose.
Interesting reaction on that one too. A few years later, Amicus Films put out a picture called "The Land of Time Forgot" with Doug McClure, and there is a sequence where I don't know if it's a pteranodon or a pterodactyl comes in and takes away a character. Anyway, the way it sails in, and because of effects, it was just a solid piece that they ran through on a cable. But it was interesting though because it mimicked the Aurora reptile, and I absolutely love that. The Aurora kit also taught me how not to pronounce pteranodon.
Me too.
Okay. You right?
Okay. Right.
And the last thing, I'm glad you enjoyed that. And the last thing I'll say too is it mentioned on the cross-sell artwork, on the back side of the instruction sheet, a clear suspension line.
Yeah.
Which is probably like a clear piece of string or something like that.
Yep.
And I didn't have mine in my box. I didn't find it. Okay. So as I'm doing this book and I have a sealed pteranodon,
Pteranodon, yeah.
I break that thing open going, this time I'm going to get that clear suspension line. I cannot wait. 50 years after the fact, break that thing open and there's no clear suspension line, Jim. I don't know if anybody, and I'll ask the community, anybody, please sign up. I might have to ask on the Prehistoric Scene page too. Did anybody get the clear suspension line?
They should have. Yeah.
I never got
what's interesting is they'd be working on a production line. Sometimes these things were boxed right at the machines. And other times they were put into great big plastic containers and then an assembly line was set up, and one woman would put in this and another one put in this and so forth and so on. And then the problem with that was somebody get up and go to the bathroom.
Ah,
Yep. And
Yeah.
suddenly the clear suspension line's not
Clear
in.
suspension line didn't get put in. Yeah.
So you know what? I will post that out on my Facebook, the Prehistoric Scenes official page, and ask folks, please sound off.
yeah, that'll
yeah,
be.
Did anybody get the clear suspension line?
I'd like to know. Yeah.
We'll find out.
I
Come on,
haven't.
community. I'm counting on you.
I've opened up a few of them. I never saw that. I didn't see that in on the box or in the instructions either.
Yeah,
But
it's on the cross cell.
it's on the cross. Okay. So I never got one either. Maybe it was something that was in the instructions but didn't actually have. Who knows?
Yeah.
Let's move.
And those details aren't on the cell sheet, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's all right.
So the tar pit. Let's talk about the tar pit for a minute. So this one I built as a kid and have recently built. So thoughts on that one?
Well, that one was interesting for me, primarily because I grew up in San Diego and LA was only 150 miles away. And my grandmother, I lived with my grandmother for, I don't know, a school year there.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to the tar pits as a school group. And then as I got older and I had a car, I used to go to the tar pit quite a bit,
Yeah.
actually. And I'd park the car down there in that parking lot and walk over. And I was absolutely fascinated with the number of animals they have pulled out
Yeah.
of the tar pit.
Yeah.
And it was also interesting because you could walk over to it, and I actually watched a fly down and land on the tar,
Yeah.
and he was there flapping his wings like crazy trying to get off.
I believe
So
it.
it still works.
Yeah. And they're
Yeah.
still pulling stuff out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the museum over there, the Natural History Museum in LA, they have a huge room that has all the stuff from the tar pits.
Yeah.
And so we went to these. I primarily went to the stuff on the West Coast, and Andy took his stuff on the East Coast because he didn't drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was able to take the train or the bus or whatever to get to the various museums. And I could jump on the 747, fly out, and spend 2 or 3 days or whatever I needed to do what research I needed to do and to talk to any paleontologist. My favorite one was a guy in Denver whose name I don't remember, but he was so excited about this concept that kids would be able to see all of these various creatures in their habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was exciting working with him
Mm-hmm.
in Denver. And again, I don't recall what his name was, but he also provided me with several books
Mm-hmm.
that I would not have otherwise gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Andy and I would hit the bookstores in New York City and walk out with $300 or $400 worth of paleontological books.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
You know,
Wow.
And John, what I'll say about the tar pit for me, okay, first series, the first 8, and that was a fun thing. It was a beautiful thing that Aurora even introduced the idea of, collecting a series of kits, because it did. It put me on the hunt. I had to have them all. And this was the last one. This was the hardest one for me to find for whatever reason. It was the last one for me to find. I used to buy some of these at a J.C. Penney store near me. And I went in and there was a round table with some kits on it right as you came in the front door, and there was a tar pit, and I got all excited. The $3 price point was a little bit difficult for me at,
Yeah.
8, 9 years old. But the thing that I was most excited about looking at that cross cell, that map that you talked about, John, is that I've got the cave, but none of the kits, according to the map, interlock. Their bases don't interlock to the cave. They all, for some reason, seem to interlock around the tar pit.
Yeah.
And I needed the tar pit in order to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And these years later, and I think probably many folks know this, but I'll say it anyway. I asked Andy, why is that? Why doesn't anything fit around the cave? It seems unusual. He says, because, and Andy had taken some time away, and he came back, and they were, the guys were developing all this stuff. He says they forgot about that interlocking feature. And they had already finished the cave, and it's like, well, put them around the tar pit. And so that's why everything converges around the tar pit, and the cave is just off to the side.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So the one thing that I noticed in building this kit is that the box art shows the vulture one way. But if you try to put it on the branch like that, it leans off to the side. So you have to, but if you turn it around the other way, then it's right. So yeah, I figured that out finally about a year ago when I built it again, and then it's perfect. I did at one point lose the little piece of meat that goes in its beak, so I had to like make some out of milliput.
And then a pork chop.
Yeah, and then I found it later. Oh well.
While you were vacuuming?
Yeah. Moving, I think. Anyway, so but yeah, I love that kit. That was I took some it gave me a chance to experiment with the tar and mixing up some Panzer Aces dark rubber, some Tamiya flat black, and Tamiya clear to get that glossy, oily. Yeah. So part of me doing these kits again is I'm learning new techniques, and I can tell you, I build things much better than my 8-year-old self did. Yeah.
Yeah, join the crowd.
Yeah.
At the time, I only had a little bottle of Chester's flat black.
Oh.
And I didn't know why it didn't look right to me. Why doesn't the tar look right to me? And
Yeah. I get some of
one thing about the tar pit was I told Andy, I said, this is the one kit we could put a car into.
No. The car pit?
Well, we would have had the car in the parking lot right next to it.
There you
So we
go.
had a sidewalk and a curb and a place for a 25th scale car.
Cool.
So yeah.